Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Jennifer Vercher. Today we'll be talking about disaster management. This is coming from your textbook, Foundation of Nursing in the Community, Chapter 14. Hopefully all of you have read through this already. The goal here, we're going to look through this PowerPoint. I'll help guide you through this. We'll hit some of the basics. Of course, read through the chapter because there's a lot more than I intend on putting in just this PowerPoint. And then we are going to have discussion in class afterward with some interactive type communication so that hopefully we will understand it a little bit better. For each subject that we go through, if we can learn about it first and then have interactive discussions about it. Possibly this will help you on your testing. So today's subject, disaster management. What is disaster and what are our objectives here? So we have three objectives to get through for this chapter. So I want you to be able to describe and discuss several different types of disasters, what they are and what they mean. I want you to know your role as a nurse in the event of a disaster and be able to describe the 4 steps that would take place during a disaster. So there are 4 very important steps that we're going to go through. So I want you to be very familiar with this material, read through your textbook, and hopefully this lecture will help get you through so that we can have so we can be engaged during the classroom setting. So what is a disaster? We'll go through several pictures here of different disasters, but the basic definition in your textbook, any natural or human-made incident that causes disruption or destruction, devastation, requiring external assistance. So that could mean many things. The picture we're looking at right here, and this could possibly be wartime. This could be an earthquake. It could have been a bomb of some sort. It could be terrorism. All, of course, different types of disaster. Fire. This could happen in your community. It could happen in your neighborhood. Even if it's just one single dwelling, it is still a disaster and still would require assistance beyond your household. This will require the assistance of firefighters, ambulances, possibly hospitals. So again, this is devastation that is requiring the assistance of others. Even cyber attacks. So a disaster doesn't have to mean that property is damaged. This could bring about total devastation if a cyber attack were large enough. This could bring down our water, our power, banking, most everything that we know would halt in the event of a large enough cyber attack. So, our nation has come to depend solely on the internet, on computers. We have without them, we would certainly suffer. So, what do we do in the event of these things? How do we prepare? How are we going to protect ourselves? What can we possibly do here? So, there are 2 different categories for disasters. And I've showed you some pictures of some natural and some man-made. One of them is even both. Fire could be natural or man-made. A fire could result in lightning out in the west that strikes some very dry land and causes acres and acres of forest fires. That is natural. Man-made, possibly arson or an accident, but still fire can go both ways. So hurricanes. We live here in South Mississippi. Several of you have been through hurricanes. A lot of you may remember Hurricane Katrina, one of the biggest disasters we've had here in many years. Tornadoes are devastating. We see them time and time again here on the Gulf Coast. Other things, blizzards, mudslides, thunderstorms, extreme heat or cold. So we do see both the extreme heat or cold, and this affects our elderly. It affects, there's a large homeless population here on the Gulf Coast, and that will affect them for the heat or the cold. So during times like this, it is our responsibility to assess our community and understand what it is that we can do to help in these events. And then there are the man-made disasters, civil unrest. This could mean riots. The rioting, which would then in turn, possibly fires or things like that. So structural collapse. Of course, we all think back to 9/11. That was man-made, and that exerted several resources. It basically shut down our country for a short period of time. So different disasters can mean different things beginning at the community level. So what is your role as a nurse during a disaster? This can take on several meanings. It depends largely upon the nurse's experience and their professional role in the community. Is your experience working in the health department giving immunizations? If so, that may be your role in the event of a disaster. You may need to do these types of things afterward, maybe tetanus shots or helping with the CDC and infection prevention. But sometimes you may need to step out of your role and be flexible. Nurses are required to be flexible at all times. So as long as it's within your scope and you can manage this, be flexible and try to assist where you can. And of course, assessments and observations, rapid needs assessment to be able to rapidly decide and communicate to others what is needed for your community right now, right this moment, during the time of a disaster. What is your initial assessment of the circumstances? And then know your available resources in your community. Know who you can go to. Know the public places that have the resources that you need, the government agencies that might be able to help you, your family, your community. So know your resources. Triage. Depending on your skill set, nurse should be capable of separating victims by priority. And we'll go over a chart about that in a moment. That this is covered in another chapter, but I do want you to be familiar with the basic triage setting. So then there's shelter management. All of us are very equipped to be able to assess the needs of others coming into a shelter. During times of disaster, shelters are often open to provide somewhere to go in the event that they don't have a home, or that their home is just not livable at the moment, or just to ride out the storm. So many people are coming into these shelters, and nurses can determine their basic health needs. Are they in need of medical assistance, or are they just in need of somewhere to be safe? So this is the triage slide I wanted you to be familiar with, because we are going to have an interactive session in class regarding this. So let's say that there is a large disaster and there could possibly be mass casualties. It is important to know and to be able to tag these victims in such a way that they can be treated effectively, efficiently. So red, someone comes in with massive hemorrhaging and massive wounds. Possibly they can survive. Maybe they need shipped. Maybe they need surgery immediately in order to survive. Well, you would tag this person in red. maybe a pneumothorax or even a penetrating chest wound, something like this um, that their life is salvageable. They need immediate assistance. And then there's yellow. You can tag them yellow, a femur fracture. Of course, they are going to be in massive pain. It's difficult to learn how to assess these things, but so this is an immediate priority. Um, uh, they need assistance, and they are probably going to need surgery and definitely intervention, but they can survive for the short term while we work on the victims that are tagged in red. Now, green is our ambulatory patients, isolated abrasions, contusions, sprains, maybe a broken arm. They can walk around with this, and they can wait. We may have a segregated area to put those in green and keep them separated from the victims who are tagged in red or black, for instance. So and then black, you're going to tag those who are already dead. They're already deceased or with minimal chance of survival. Let's say an open head wound. You're seeing brain matter. They're alive, but are we going to have much of a chance to save them right now? So that or 95% burns throughout over their body. We may need to put them in, tag them in the black section because there's just not very much chance of survival. So I want you to remember this and look over this because I want you to be familiar so that we can have an interactive exercise. There are 4 steps in disaster management, and each one's important in their own way. Prevention, of course, we want to prevent any type of disaster if possible. Now, of course, when they occur naturally, it's difficult to prevent. But what we can do is mitigate, and that means being able to limit or reduce the chance of devastation if disaster should occur. So let's say we last month a tornado hit and we have a hole in our roof. Well, in order to mitigate any further damage, we should cover that up or get it fixed at the very least cover it with something so that we don't develop any further damage. Or for instance, you buy a mobile home, you put it on your land. You don't tie it down with any straps or anything, it's just sitting there on blocks. So when the first heavy wind comes over and it dumps the mobile home over on its side, well, you didn't do your due diligence in mitigating those circumstances. So that can be prevention. Preparedness, have a checklist. Every family should have a checklist for what if a disaster should happen in your home, in your community, whether it be a hurricane, a fire, or anything that could happen to change the way that your life situation is going to happen and how do you respond. So have this checklist in place for your own family and have a plan to keep your family safe. That way you won't have to think about them and worry about them so that you can possibly go help others. So the third step, response. So initially, it begins at the local level. It begins with you, your family, your neighborhood, and locally. If there are not enough resources, if it's stretching beyond what you can do in your community, they may need to call in state resources or even go into federal resources if all of our resources are depleted. And then there's recovery, the act of getting back to normal. And this is assisted with churches, maybe volunteer agencies, maybe Habitat for Humanity, the American Red Cross, where they can come in and try to help everyone get back to some sort of normalcy in the rebuilding stages. So some interactive strategies that, and I've alluded to this going through this presentation with you. I want you to be able to talk about and understand some of these things in class tomorrow. I want you to develop your own checklist tonight. bring that to class tomorrow. In the event of a disaster, what are you going to do? What is your checklist for you and your family, your pets, your children, your parents, whatever the case may be? Have this checklist, bring it to class so that we can critique this together. We will pass them off to other students, and we're going to critique and see what we could do better, or maybe what we might have missed, whether it be medications, pet food, things like that. Be prepared to answer questions related to disaster management. We're going to be using the clickers so that we can all be engaged in trying to answer these questions. The more we answer and the more possibilities that we encounter, the better you're likely to do on your test. And then that slide we showed about the color coding for triage. This will be coming up in a chapter soon, so I want you to be familiar with this. We're going to split the class in half, and I'm going to bring tags, and I'm going to give you a wound. Maybe it's a femur fracture. Maybe it's a tension pneumothorax, and we're going to let the rest of the class decide what color code are you, and where are we going to cohort you during this triage. So be prepared. That this is a basic coverage of this chapter, but I want you to read through the chapter so that we can be prepared to talk about these things and get interactive so that we can understand together and be ready to ask questions so that the rest of us can be involved as well. So I look forward to seeing you in class. Thank you.